Everybody, Heather here. So today we're going to be working on our July 2013 watercoloring card kit. And for this month's kit, I've picked this cute Saturated Canary image called Thank You. And she is an unmounted stamp, so in your kit I've included a piece of easy mount so you can mount her to get stamping. If you're watching this video later on, there's a link to the store down in the description box. You can go there and see if it's still available. Just type in Thank You in the search bar at the top of the store, and if it's available it will pop up. If not, check out some of the other stuff that is available in the store. So I've already stamped my image on Canson 140 pound watercolor paper with Ranger Archival Jet Black ink. So let's color. Okay, so to color today, I have got my medium and my detail zig water brushes, my Tim Holtz ink palette that I have my ink in. I have a piece of acetate that I've taped to a piece of cardstock so I can mix a couple of colors. And of course I have my crusty paper towel to wipe my ink off on. And don't mind that it's all crusty, I just, when it wears out, I go get a new one. Alright, so we're going to start out by outlining our image, and for that we're going to use tumbled glass. So far I'm going to use my medium brush so that I can cover more space. Let's get a little closer here. Okay, so I'm going to give my brush a squeeze and check it on the back of my hand to make sure it's damp, and it is. That's perfect. And when you're doing the outlining, it's okay for it to be a little bit wetter than when you're painting. I don't mind, because the more water, then it spreads out a little bit more. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of my tumbled glass, and I'm going to start right here underneath the first skirt. So I'm going to leave a little bit of that color right along her skirt, and that's quite a bit on my brush still, so I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then I'm going to come in with just the water on my brush and pull this ink down towards the bottom of her shoe. Well, towards her shoe. Okay, and then my brush picks up ink while I'm wiping it around, so I wipe it off. And I'm going to grab a little bit of more of my tumbled glass. I always start out with new. And I'm going to continue all the way around my girl. So I'm just going to go right up here. And then I'm going to wipe the excess off of my brush. And then I'm going to come back. And then I'll get a little closer. I didn't get really close the first time. And use that to wipe out. But I'm picking up quite a bit of ink. So I'm going to kind of bring a little bit of that up here. Just so I can use a little bit more up. And then come back. We don't want it to dry, so I'm going to come back with just my water and brush that out towards the outside, towards my background out here. Okay, now I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to come back. I don't want it quite so dark right here next to her, so I'm going to wipe a little bit of that out here, more towards the background. Okay, that looks pretty good. Got a little piece of fuzz on my brush there. Okay, wipe that off. Okay, so then you wipe your brush off again, and I go grab some more new ink. And let's start up here, kind of work our way down to her neck, up here, and then wipe my brush off, and then come back with just my water, and pick up that ink. Be careful going around her head there, and brush that ink out here into the background. I'm going to get a little bit closer here to her face, try not to get on her face. And then she's got a little bitty space in between her arm right here. Well, I've got a little bit of ink on my brush. I'm just going to wipe in there and get a little bit of blue in there. And I may have to do that again because that wasn't very much blue. And I'm going to come back up and spread this out a little bit more so that it fades out into nothing out here into the background. Okay, and wipe your brush off. Grab some more new ink. And I think I'll go start over here on this side. So let's do... add a little bit right here, and then wipe my brush off. Oops, my ink palette here's getting in the way. Let me move that a little bit. And then come back with just my water. And I'm going to move that a little bit closer to her. Try not to get it on her. And then brush out away from her. And wipe that excess ink off my brush. Come back with just my water again. And feather out that line. I want it to blend out here into the background until it just turns into paper. And if your brush is feeling like it's dragging, give it a little squeeze and give it a little bit more water. And you'll know if it's starting to feel a little rough or it's not moving your ink around. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so I've wiped my brush off. I've grabbed some more ink. Let's go up here and start up here. So let's go right around there. Okay, and wipe my excess ink off. I'm going to come back and try to get a little bit closer. Down here in between her cheek and next to her arm. Okay, and then we're just going to start moving that ink away. I'm going to turn my girl a little bit here. Okay, and then I've wiped my brush off again. I'm going to come back with just the water, and I'm flicking that ink and pulling it out away from her out here into our background. Go over the second time. I still got a line right there. And you don't want it to dry. That's why I work in small sections. Do a little section at a time, because once it's dry, it's not going to be going anywhere. Okay, that looks good. So let's get up here at the top of her head. So we're going to do a little bit here. Okay. Come back. We're going to move that ink. I better get a little bit closer to that ponytail right there. Get my edge wet. Okay, wipe that excess ink off. And then let's brush that out here into our background. Okay. So that's our blue there for that. And then I also wanted to add a little bit of a shadows. So I'm going to grab my little piece of acetate, and on the end of my brush I'm going to grab a little dab of Stormy Sky. So I've got just a little bitty dab there on the end of my brush. I'm going to wipe it around on my piece of acetate, so that's hardly any. And then I'm going to grab a little dab of just probably twice as much of the tumbled glass. And I'm going to wipe that right over the top of that. And that makes it just a little bit darker. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off. And then I'm going to use this little bit of mixed paint to add a little bit of shadows over here on this side of her body. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that mixed paint. And right here where her face is tipped down, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit in there. I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to come back with just her water on our brush and flick that out and just blend that in. And that'll give it a little bit of shadow right there where her face is dipped down. And let's do a little bit here underneath of her skirt. So I'll grab a little bit of my mixed paint and add that right along her skirt there. And again, wipe your excess off. And then come back and feather that line down into your other color. That'll give it a nice little shadow there. And let's see. I think I'll do a little bit right here underneath the first skirt too, on this side. So again, grab a little bit of your mixed paint. And we're just going to go right like that. And then wipe the brush off and come back with just water and flick that color out into our other color. And I give it a nice little shadow right there. And like I said, right here, she's got a little space in here where her arm is showing. I'm going to get a little bit of my tumbled glass because I didn't get very much color in there. And just give that a little dab. Make it a little more blue. And then I colored her hair bow up here blue, so I'm going to go ahead and get that wet with some water. And then I'm going to take my paper towel and just dab it and pick some of that up. Okay, so we're going to let that dry, and then we're going to color her skin. Okay, so before we do the skin, let's do this, the ground down here. That way I'll give her a little bit more chance to dry up here at the top. So for the ground, we're going to use Shabby Shutters. Grab some of that on my brush. I'm still using the detail, or the medium brush. And I don't want it to stop right here at the bottom, so I'm going to say it's going to go up here a little bit, and we're just going to bring that around. And we just want to fade that color out. Okay, that looks pretty good on that side. I think I'll add a little bit more over here. So grab a little bit more of our Shabby Shutters. And let's bring this line for our grass out a little bit more. And brush it like so. Okay, that looks pretty good for a first coat. And then it looks like I went ahead and added some peeled paint. So let's see, make sure it's dry there. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my peeled paint onto my brush. And I got quite a bit, so I'm going to dab a little bit off. So let's start over here on this side, because we know this side is a lot drier. So, and I don't mind because it's grass, it's going to bleed out a little bit if it's not dry all the way. But I just was flicking that away from her shoe and just causing some more dark shadows over here. Okay, that looks pretty good on that side. So let's go ahead and get this other side. Whoops, I colored her shoe there. It's a good thing her shoe's going to be brown. I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm just going to come back and feather that just a little bit more. And let's see if I can pick up some of this color off of her shoe here. I'm going to wipe that off, pick it up with my brush. And each time I pick it up with my brush, I'm wiping my brush off on the paper towel so that I don't get any more. Okay, that looks pretty good for ground. So now let's go up here and work on her skin. So for her skin, I'm going to start here on her arms, and I'm going to start with my Tattered Rose. So I'm going to switch to my detail brush because those arms are pretty dinky. And I've grabbed a little bit of my Tattered Rose, and I'm just going to put a little bit of that along the edge. And I don't have very much on my brush, so I'm just going to kind of wipe that around, all the way around on her arm. And then I think I'll wipe it off, and I'm going to grab a new dab. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to want it to be where I want shadows, so I'm going to start down here on the bottom, and I had a lot more this time. So I'm going to wipe my brush off and then come back and use that ink that I put down to move around onto her arm. Like that. Okay. And then again, I've wiped my brush off. Let's add a little bit to her neck. And I didn't have very much on there, so I'm just going to let that be what I put down. And then for her face, I want it to be, it's tipping down over here, so I want it to be darker on this whole side of her face rather than this side. So I'm going to lay my ink on this side of her face. And be careful of her eye right there because it does touch the side of her cheek and her ear. Let's bring a little bit more. Okay, so then I'm going to, now that I've got my ink down, I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to work that ink I laid down across to this side. Get over here to this side and her ear. Okay, and I'm going to wipe my brush off because I'm picking up ink as I go. I better soften her ear up just a little bit there. Okay, that looks pretty good for a first coat. Okay, so let's add one more coat of our Tattered Rose to her face. So I've grabbed a little bit more of my Tattered Rose, and again, start where you want the shadow. So I'm going to start over here on this side, add my ink, okay, and I'm going to wipe the excess off of my brush, and I'm going to use that ink I laid down to pull over to this side. Just need it to be a little bit darker over here. Okay, and I'm picking up ink, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off again, and then come back and spread some more over to this side. And I wasn't worried that I went over her little lips because we're going to paint those a dark red, so they'll be fine. So now let's go in and add some shadows, and for that I'm going to use Tattered Rose and tea dye that I've mixed. And you can just mix some if you're just for this time, but I use it all the time, so I've already mixed it in one of my empty ink trays, and so it's already mixed every time I want to use it. So I'm going to start out by adding some of that down here to her arm. Let's add a little bit of shadow. And wipe my brush off and then come back, and we're just going to soften that line. And you may have to wipe your brush off again. just want to darken up the underside of her arm just a little bit. Okay, I'll grab a little bit more to this side. So again, I've grabbed it right under the underside of her arm, and then wipe my brush off, and then come back and pull that ink up just a little bit, enough to soften your line. And let's do her neck. And remember, we want this side of her face to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to start over there. So I'm going to add a little bit of my shadows over here. And let's add a little bit of that ear right there. Okay, and then I'm not going to pull it all the way across. We're just going to very lightly soften that line and just make this side of her face a little bit shadowed. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good, but I got a line right here, so let me soften that just a little bit more. And then if you wanted to have a little bit of definition for her nose, you could go and add a little line. So let's go ahead. I've grabbed a little bit of my mixed paint, and I'm just going to give her a little bit. Whoops, and it was wet. That was not good. Wait for it to dry. And we'll just use that a little bit to darken this side up. I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to wait for this to dry a little bit more, and then we'll add a little bit better line here. Dab that off a little bit. Okay, so while we're waiting for her face to dry a little bit more so we can add a little bit more color, let's go down here and add a coat to her shoes. And for that, we're going to use walnut stain. So I've switched to my medium brush because it's a little bit more area. And I'm just going to take my walnut stain, I'm going to add it to the bottom of her shoe, and I'm going to be careful going up here towards her sock. And I'm going to bring the ink down around over to this side. Okay, and then if I have more ink on my brush, I'm going to wipe that off. And then we're going to come in and we're going to brush that ink up towards the top of her shoe. Give that a nice first coat. Okay, that looks good for the first time. So we're going to grab a little bit more on our brush. I've wiped my brush off, and I'm going to grab some new. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to go right along the bottom of that shoe. And I have a lot of ink, so I'm going to wipe that off. And then we're going to come in, and we're just going to pull that ink towards the top of her shoe. Okay, that looks good. So now we've let our face dry up here, so I'm going to switch to my detail brush. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of my mixed Tattered Rose with my tea dye. And I want to add a little bit of definition right here where her nose is. And I didn't let it dry the first time, so it made a big mess. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a line like that. And then I'm going to go, I've wiped my brush off, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to feather this line on this side so that it comes towards this eye over here just a little bit. And I picked up ink, so let me wipe that off. And I'm going to go in and just give that a little brush on that side. So she's got just a little bit of definition there on her nose so that it doesn't look, so it looks like she's got a little bit of a shadow right there. So let's go up here and start her hair since we didn't touch up there. And for that, we're going to start with pumice stone. So I've switched to my medium brush. And I'm going to grab a little bit of pumice stone. And this is just a base coat. So I'm going to start right here in her part of her hair, and she's got a little patch of hair underneath this bow that's showing, so grab that. And I'm just going to use that whole color to come around over here to this side. Okay, so that's a nice first coat for that. So let's get her ponytail too. So I've wiped my brush off, I've grabbed a new little spot of my pumice stone. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add some to her ponytail. And we want to continue with that ponytail down here and brush that color out here towards the end. And it's just to add a base coat, so it shouldn't be, it's just a nice light color. So in case you miss a patch, you'll have a little bit of color there underneath. Okay, so let's go down here and add a second coat to our shoes. So I'm going to grab a little bit of walnut stain on my brush. And let's go right along the bottom here. Add a little bit more and then pull that color up here towards the top where she was looking kind of light. And I wipe my brush off, grab a new little dab. Let's darken that up just a little bit more. And I've got quite a bit there, so I'm going to wipe my brush off. And then come in and pull that up towards the top of her shoe. Okay, and then her hair looks like it's dried. So let's go add some brush corduroy, and I'm going to switch to my detail brush so I can not get quite so much ink on there. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my brush corduroy, and I want to start in the shadow, so I'm going to start down here where her little part is. I'm going to put a little bit on there, and then I'm going to use that ink to brush down on this side. And don't forget that little patch right behind that ponytail. Okay, so that's a nice start for that side. And then I'm going to grab a little bit more, and we're going to start this side, so I'm going to go ahead and lay down a little bit more on this side. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and we're going to use that ink to brush out and down towards this side. Okay, let's go ahead and do this side. So wipe your brush off, grab a new little patch of your brush corduroy. I'm going to put a little bit right there, and that's quite a bit, so I'm going to wipe my brush off. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to brush that up, and that's still quite a bit, so I'm going to wipe my brush again. And then I'm going to brush up. There, that looks nice. Okay, and then we'll do a ponytail. So grab your new little batch. I'm going to add a little dab right up here. Wipe my brush off. And come in and pull that little patch right up here towards the center there. Okay, and then let's grab a new bunch. And she's got a little part here that looks like it's coming out from behind. So I'm going to do a little bit right there. Wipe my brush off. And bring that color out. Okay, that's quite a bit. So I'm going to wipe my brush off and pull that out towards the end. Okay, and then let's get a little bit. I didn't get very much over here, so let me grab just a little dab. And I'm going to do just a little bitty bit right here along that ponytail where her little bow is. And then we're going to pull that. I don't want it to be quite that dark, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that all the way down towards the bottom here. And that gives her a nice start to her shadows. So now let's go down here and add a little bit of color to her cheeks. And for that I'm going to start with worn lipstick. So I've got my detail brush, and I'm going to grab a little dab of that onto the end. And a little bit goes a long ways. I'm going to put a little bit here on the edge of her cheek. And then I'm going to wipe my excess off. I'm going to come in and just brush that out and soften that line out into her cheek. Then I'm going to grab a new little dab. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And wipe my excess off, and then soften that line by dragging it up onto her face a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. So while that's drying, let's go and add, let's add a coat to her eyes. And for that, we're going to use tumbled glass. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my tumbled glass on my brush. I'm going to brush down until I get to that little spot that I want to leave white. Same with this side. That looks pretty good for a first coat. So let's go up here and add a coat to, well, no, let's do her lips too, as long as we're letting things dry here on her face. So for her lips, I'm going to use Festive Berries. Grab a little bit of that. And put a little dab right on there. Okay, and then we're going to let that dry a second. So while that's drying, let's go add a coat to her hair, our last color for her hair. And for that, we're going to use Walnut Stain. So I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of that. And I just want to add a little bit of shadows onto her hair. So like right here in where her part is, I'm going to put a little bit, put me a line of color down. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to flick that line out just to soften the edges. Okay, I think I'll just do... Okay, and then the same thing up here above her ponytail. I'm going to give it a little bit right on the edge of that little ponytail wrapper. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe my excess off. And again, go in and just pull that line out and soften it up. And let's go ahead and get this little dip in right here. I collected quite a bit of ink there, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off and then come back and soften it just a little bit more. And I think I'm actually going to darken this side up just a little bit more. So I'm going to grab just another little dab. And I'm going to pull this down this way just because her head's tipped down on this side, so I want it to be a little bit darker over here. So let's give her cheeks a little bit more color, and for that I'm going to use aged mahogany. So I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of that on the end of my brush because that's really dark, but I want to darken it up just a little bit. So let's give it a little brush right there at the edge, and then we're going to use just our water to flick that out just a little bit more. Bring that color out here into her cheek more. And we're going to do the same thing for the other side. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that aged mahogany on my brush. Let's give that a little swirl right here underneath of her eye. And then I'm going to wipe that excess off. Go in and brush that out here a little bit. Okay, she looks very sassy there. Okay, so now let's go up here and work on this little hair bow, and for that we're going to start with festive berries. I'm going to grab a little bit of my festive berries, and let's just do this little knot first, and then I'm going to give each one of these little bows just a little bit in the middle there, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to pull that ink out, and I've got quite a bit of ink gathered there on the end of my brush, so I'm going to wipe it off again. And I'm going to come back and pull that ink more towards the outside there, so it's way lighter out here at the end. And we're going to do the same thing with this side. I have a little bit less over here, so I'm going to go ahead and brush all the way to the edge. So it's a nice light color out here at the end. And we also use that on her dress, so let's start that. And I'm going to go ahead and put my festive berries right along this little bow tie here first. Let's get this sleeve a little bit darker up here, and then we're going to use that ink to brush over to this sleeve. So this sleeve will be a lot lighter because it's more out in the sun over here. Okay, and then we're going to do the skirt too. Go ahead and grab a little bit more of new paint, and I'm going to make my skirt be darkest on this side. I'm just going to go, whoops, I'm going to go right along the edge there. Try not to touch her arm. Go underneath that little sash, and I'm going to pull that ink down here onto her skirt. So we're just going to go back and forth, working our way along. So it doesn't dry on the edge. So we've pulled that ink over here all the way to this side. So we got a nice light pink color over here on this side. Okay, now it looks pretty good for a first coat. So let's do that down here to this underskirt too. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my festive berries. And so I've got, let's see, this one right here I'm going to make, this middle one, we're going to make festive berries. So we're going to give that a little dab. Like so. And I got quite a bit there still, so I'm going to wipe my brush off now. And we're just going to use that ink to pull this way. I'm trying not to get it on everything else. And we're just going to go right over here to the edge, like that. And I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to grab a new little dab. And I want to go ahead and do this little part of the skirt up here. And let's add a little bit dark over here and then pull this way a little bit. Okay, that looks good for our first coat. So we got one more underskirt here. That's going to be this one, right here at the very bottom. Give that a coat of paint. Get that one started there. Okay, I'm liking that. So far, so good. So while we're letting that dress dry a little bit, I think I'll go up here and I'm going to add another coat of my tumbled glass to her eyes. So I'm going to grab me a little dab of that. I'm just going to darken them up just a little bit more. They're kind of pale. Like that. There, that looks much better. And then I think I will, her hair's pretty light, so I think I'm going to add another coat to that too. So I'm going to grab the brushed corduroy this time and maybe darken it up just a little bit more. Okay, so I got that. I'm going to grab a little bit of my brushed corduroy. I'm going to add that over here. We're just going to brush that up. I think she just needs to be darkened up just a little bit more. She's looking kind of pale there. Oops, be careful not to get your red. I just did right here. Wipe that down a little bit there. Just smooth that back up there. Okay, and let's also add a little bit more down here to this little curly Q. And let's darken up this ponytail back here just a bit more. A little bit more color on there. And each time I do it, I get a different color. So it just seemed really light compared to the last girl I did. So now let's add a little bit of shadow to our dress down here. So I'm going to grab my little piece of acetate, and for that I'm going to put a little bitty drop on the end of my brush of aged mahogany. So there I've got my little bitty drop. We're just going to spread that out here. Then I'm going to wipe my extra off, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get twice as much of my festive berries. So I've got a little bit more on my brush there, and I'm just going to wipe that right in that aged mahogany. Just darken it up just a little bit, and I'm going to use that mixed paint to add some color to my dress here. Okay, so I'll grab a little bit of our mixed paint, and I'm going to add some shadows on my dress. And let's go right along the bottom here. Maybe darken up the sleeve a little bit more, and make sure you wipe your excess off after you put your line on there, and then come in and just soften that line by pulling it across. And that gave it a nice shadow there in the corner. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on this side of her skirt. So I've grabbed a little bit of my mixed paint. We're just going to add a little bit right along the edge. And then we're just going to feather that color down here into her skirt. Okay. And then let's do the same thing with this little side right here. Wipe my brush off and bring it down a little bit more. And I think I'll actually do a little bit over here on this side, darken this side up just a little bit more. And then I'm liking how dark this one is, so I'm going to leave that one like that. Let's also go up here and just add a little bit to our hair bow. I'm just going to give that just a quick brush right there in the middle. Maybe that little knot. And wipe my brush off and then come back and feather that line out to the edge. Okay, that looks pretty good for a hair bow. So now let's go down here and let's start her socks, and for that I'm going to use Wild Honey. Since we didn't color this last little red stripe, we're okay to touch it. So we're going to grab a little bit of our Wild Honey, and I'm just going to, let's start over here just to be safe. Oops. Okay, that was not Wild Honey. Okay. And wipe that off real quick. That was Shabby Shudders. I put the wrong color there. Okay. Helps if you read the little cards over here so I know which one I'm doing. Okay, so now I've got my Wild Honey. I'm going to go down this side of her sock. And I don't want her socks to per se be orange, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my excess off. And then we're going to pull this color over to this side of the sock so it turns a nice light yellow color. But it's still a little bit orangish over here on this side. So got a nice little shadow there. I'm going to do the same thing for this side. So I grabbed a little bit of my new color on my brush. We're going to brush that right down the edge of her sock. Brush that off. And then come back and pull that over here to this other side. And I'm trying to be careful not to get too close to that. Uh-oh. Kids must have got off from school and are walking by. Trying to get not too close to this red because I don't want to accidentally grab some of that. Okay, so those look good. I'm going to leave those, but we're going to go up here and we're going to add a little bit to this second underskirt. So I picked the one with the little flowers on it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of my Wild Honey right along the edge. And wipe my brush off and then come back and pull that down to the edge. If you get too much on your brush, make sure to wipe that excess ink off and then come back and you can smooth it again. And again, I'm trying to be careful not to get touch the red. So let's go add some to our pocket. Brush that pocket up. And then let's do her belt. These little collars up here on her shirt. A little crazy up here. Wiped up on the blue part. Smush that back down in there. So now let's go to these last two underskirts, and for that I've used Evergreen Bough and tumbled glass that I've mixed. So I've already done that on my little piece of acetate, and I just took a tiny dab of my evergreen bough, and then I used twice as much of my tumbled glass to mix it. I didn't want it to be too greenish blue, but just a little bit. Let's go ahead and start down here on the bottom. So I'm just going to wipe my color right along the edge there. Get that started, and then I'm going to wipe the excess off my brush and then come back and use that little bit I put down to pull down to the bottom. And same thing for this one over here. Grab a little bit of fresh paint here and put that on. Wipe my excess off my brush and then come back and pull that color down to the bottom. And let's get up here. We're just going to pull that down towards the middle here. And wipe my excess water off my brush and come back and get new paint. And we're going to start over on this side. And again, I'm trying to be careful not to get it too close to that red. And that's a nice, pretty light blue color. So I'm going to add a little bit of shadow. So I went in and I've added just a little bitty dab more of my Evergreen Bough just to darken it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to come in and we're going to just put that close to where we want to have some shadows. let's go ahead and do right up here along the edge. And remember to wipe your excess off and then come back and just lightly feather that line down just a little bit more. Darken up just a little bit. And then we're going to do the same thing up here. Okay, and make sure to wipe your excess off. And then come back and we're just going to brush that color down until it's nice and smooth. And then let's get over here too. So I'm going to get right next to where her other skirt is. Give it a little shadow there in the corner. And pull that down just a little bit more. But that is our thank you Saturated Canary image all colored up. So let's put her together. Alright, so I got all my parts here, and I think my girl's still a little bit damp, so I'm going to wait and put her down a little bit later. So I've got all my stuff. So we don't have any ribbon or anything going around the back, so I'm just going to start putting things down. So I've got this great aqua piece that's going to go first. Attach that. Whoops, brush some of that fuzz off. And then next you have this great plaid piece, or you can use the wood grain with the flowers on the back. They're both really cute. Nice springy fun colors. That down like that. And then next I put down this cute little piece with the butterflies, or if you wanted you could use the teal with the little dots. And that, well, let's see here, let's make it go this way so the butterflies are flipped up. Get that so it's even with the aqua piece. And then next came this cute little pink piece with the dots, or you could use the chevrons on the back. And this piece I'm going to put like, let's move it over just a little bit. Whoops, and here on my original card I used the plaid piece on this, and I've used the side with flowers this time because I'm a ding-dong. But you'll get to see it both ways. Okay, so let's do that little flower piece. We'll get to see how cute it looks with both. Okay, so now I'm going to attach my girl. So let's give her a little bit of glue here. And I didn't pop her up this time because I had the butterflies that were dimensional that I'm going to put on. So I didn't do any of that with the popping up. So let's put her down like that. And then we're going to attach her. And she is kind of over here on the side, like this. And then let's go ahead and do our Sharpie white paint pins. So I'm going to shape that up. And it's how hard you press it as to how big of a dot you get. So you just want to do a quick little spot with your little pin there. And I always shake it with the lid on before I put it on there. And then let's go ahead and do this little, this memory box die. I thought it was really pretty. Look at all that fine little detail stuff. But this one's called Blooming Vine. So we're going to put that one on. So I've got a little bit of liquid glue. And I didn't attach it, I didn't want to attach it all the way so everything was stuck down. So I put just a little bit of my glue onto the back of the stem. And just kind of put a little bit, you know, just around, not all over, because I want some of the flowers to be able to be lifted up. Okay, so I put a little bit of my glue on the back, and then I want that to go, I want to make sure it fits in the envelope, so I want it to be on the card. I'm going to kind of watch where I put it on here. And we're just going to bring that down and around like this. hold it down for a second and let it dry. And also, I'm going to add a couple of little half pearls. So I'm going to get my little liquid adhesive. And I'm going to give that a little squirt up here in the corner. Or you could also use, if you have some of those little bitty glue dots, you could use that. But they don't have adhesive on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one of those. Whoops. And of course they're flipping upside down. Squish that down. One for this side. That. And then let's put our stickles on. So I'm going to pound my stickles down because I didn't have it upside down. I'm going to add some stickles up here to her hair bow. That all nice and pretty sparkled up. And let's do our pocket. And I'm going to do this little orange underskirt here too. Give it a nice little sparkle there. Okay, and then in your kit this time you got a package of these Petaloo Premier Butterflies in pink. And these already come with the pop dots on the back, so you just have to peel them off and stick them where you want. And they're three-dimensional. They're like two butterflies, and then there's pop dots in between and stuff. And it's got a cute little bark, and they're just really cute. I found them, and I'm like, oh, let's try those out this month. So I'm going to put a little one over here, and then I'm going to grab a bigger one and put that one over here. You can put yours wherever you want, and you get enough in the package that you should have enough to put 2 on each card, and then you'll have 1 butterfly left over. So if you wanted to use put an extra one on there, you could. But that is our July 2013 watercoloring card kit. Thank you. And that's how cute, and I love that I accidentally put this on there the opposite direction, this paper. But here's the card with it, with the plaid. So they're both really cute. And I hope you had fun coloring with me today. If you have a question, just leave a comment in the box and I'll get back with you. If not, we'll see you next time. Bye.